The day I looked out my living room window and saw 3 people huddled around my flagpole like vultures circling a carcass, I knew my peaceful morning was about to turn into absolute chaos. I grabbed my coffee mug and stepped outside onto the porch of my home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, squinting against the bright June sun. The trio turned to face me in unison, and I immediately recognized the woman in the center. Patricia Hutchinson, the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, stood there with her arms crossed and that pinched expression she always wore, like she had just bitten into a lemon. "Mr. Lucas Crawford," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to discuss this flagpole situation immediately." I took a slow sip of my coffee, buying myself a moment to process whatever nonsense was about to unfold. The flagpole in question stood proudly in my front yard, displaying the American flag I raised every single morning without fail. It was 20 feet tall, regulation height, and positioned exactly where I wanted it. "What situation would that be, Patricia?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She gestured dramatically at the flagpole as if it were some sort of monstrosity. "This unauthorized structure violates our community guidelines. Section 12, Paragraph 4 clearly states that all exterior modifications must be approved by the HOA board before installation." The 2 people flanking her nodded in agreement. I recognized them as board members, though I could never remember their names. They seemed to exist solely to back up whatever Patricia decreed. "That's interesting," I said, setting my mug down on the porch railing, "because I submitted the proper paperwork 3 months ago when I moved in." Patricia's left eye twitched. "We have no record of any such submission." "Well, that sounds like a filing problem on your end, not a compliance problem on mine." I kept my voice level, but I could feel my jaw tightening. After serving 2 tours in Afghanistan as a Marine, dealing with bureaucratic nonsense from a power-hungry HOA president ranked pretty low on my list of intimidating situations. "Regardless," she continued, her voice rising slightly, "the board has voted and the flagpole must be removed within 72 hours or we will be forced to take action." I descended the porch steps slowly, closing the distance between us. At 6'2", I had a good 8 inches on Patricia, but I made sure to maintain a respectful distance. "What kind of action?" "Fines will be assessed daily at a rate of $100 per day. If the violation continues for more than 30 days, we can place a lien on your property." She delivered this threat with obvious satisfaction. The guy on her left, a balding man in khakis and a polo shirt, chimed in. "The rules apply to everyone, Mr. Crawford. We cannot make exceptions." "I'm not asking for an exception," I replied. "I'm flying the American flag on my own property." "Last I checked, that's protected." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Your patriotism is admirable, but it does not supersede our community standards. These rules exist to maintain property values and aesthetic consistency." I looked around Meadowbrook Estates, taking in the cookie-cutter houses that all looked like they had been stamped out by the same machine. Beige siding, brown trim, perfectly manicured lawns measured to the millimeter. It was like living in a suburban simulation. "I'll tell you what," I said, fighting to keep my temper in check. "I'll look over the HOA documents again. If there's something specific that prohibits flagpoles, we can discuss it further. But I'm not taking down my flag based on a verbal complaint." Patricia's face flushed red. "This is not a complaint. This is a violation notice. You will receive formal documentation by end of business today." She spun on her heel, her 2 lackeys scrambling to follow her back to the golf cart they had driven over. I watched them leave, then looked up at my flag snapping in the breeze. The red, White and blue stood out brilliantly against the cloudless sky. I had raised that flag every morning since moving into this neighborhood, and I would be damned if some petty tyrant with a clipboard was going to make me stop. Back inside, I pulled out the massive binder of HOA documents I had received at closing. The thing was easily 3 inches thick, filled with single-spaced text covering everything from approved paint colors to the maximum height of mailbox posts. I started reading through Section 12, which dealt with exterior modifications. My wife Sarah would have known exactly where to look. She had been the detail-oriented one, the person who actually read instruction manuals and terms of service agreements. But Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by a drunk driver on her way home from work. The flag I flew was partly for her, a reminder of the freedoms we fought to protect, the life we had planned to build together. I shook off the wave of grief and focused on the text in front of me. Section 12 did indeed require approval for modifications, but there was an asterisk next to the word modifications. I flipped to the appendix and found the relevant footnote. It listed exemptions, and right there in subsection C, it mentioned flagpoles used for displaying the American flag. I grabbed my phone and took photos of the relevant pages. Then I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the carbon copy of the modification request I had submitted. I had learned in the Marines to always keep copies of everything, a habit that was about to pay off. Sure enough, there was my application, dated March 15th, requesting permission to install a flagpole for the purpose of displaying the American flag. I had even included the specifications, the height, diameter, and placement coordinates. At the bottom, I had noted the exemption clause from the HOA documents. At 4:30 that afternoon, a certified letter arrived. I signed for it and opened the envelope to find an official violation notice printed on heavy cardstock with the Meadowbrook Estates logo at the top. It repeated Patricia's ultimatum: flagpole to be removed within 72 hours or face daily fines starting at $100. I scanned the letter and my supporting documents, then drafted an email to the HOA board. I kept it professional and factual, attaching the photos of the exemption clause and my original application. I pointed out that I had followed proper procedures and that the flagpole fell under the protected category of patriotic displays. I hit send and waited. 2 days passed with no response. On the 3rd day, I received another certified letter. This one informed me that my appeal had been reviewed and denied. The board had determined that the exemption clause only applied to small handheld flags or flags mounted on the house itself, not freestanding poles. My fines would begin the following day. I called the number listed on the letterhead and got an answering service. I left a detailed message requesting a hearing before the board to discuss the matter in person. The answering service operator assured me someone would return my call within 48 hours. No one called. On day 4, I walked out to get my mail and found another notice, this time informing me that I had been assessed a $100 fine. Payment was due within 30 days. I crumpled the notice and went back inside to do some research. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 was a federal law that prevented real estate management organizations from restricting homeowners from displaying the flag. I had known about it vaguely, but now I read through the actual text. It specifically prohibited HOAs from enforcing rules that would prevent flag display, though it did allow for reasonable restrictions regarding size, placement, and manner of display. My flagpole was 20 feet tall, which was well within reasonable limits. It was placed in my front yard, clearly visible but not obstructing any views or creating any hazards. and it was a standard residential flagpole, nothing ostentatious or unusual. I printed out the relevant sections of the federal law and prepared another email, this time with a firmer tone. I informed the board that their attempt to force removal of my flagpole violated federal law and that I would not be paying any fines. I suggested we resolve this matter amicably before it escalated further. Patricia responded within an hour. Her email was terse and condescending. She claimed that the federal law did not apply because the HOA had reasonable restrictions in place, and my flagpole violated those restrictions. She also informed me that my fine had increased to $200 due to my continued non-compliance. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the email on my laptop screen. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from pure frustration. I had served my country for 8 years. I had done 3 deployments, missed birthdays and holidays, watched friends die in the desert. And now I was home, trying to live a quiet life, and some power-drunk HOA president was threatening me over a flagpole. I needed help. I opened a new browser window and searched for attorneys in Cedar Rapids who specialized in HOA disputes. The first 3 firms I called either did not handle those cases or had conflicts of interest because they already represented other HOAs in the area. The 4th firm, Morrison & Associates, agreed to a consultation. Attorney Jennifer Morrison met with me the following afternoon at her office downtown. She was in her mid-40s, with gray streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. I laid out the entire situation, providing copies of all the documents. She reviewed everything carefully, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "They do not have a leg to stand on. The federal law is crystal clear, and your flagpole is completely reasonable. The exemption in the HOA documents supports your position, and you followed proper procedures. So what do?" I asked. "We send them a cease and desist letter, informing them that their actions violate federal law and that all fines must be rescinded immediately. We give them 10 days to comply. If they refuse, we file suit in federal court." The thought of going to court made my stomach turn. I just wanted to fly my flag in peace. But I also was not about to back down from bullies, whether they wore enemy uniforms or HOA badges. "Let's do it," I said. Jennifer drafted the letter that afternoon. It was 5 pages of legal citations and firm language, making it absolutely clear that the HOA was in the wrong and that continued harassment would result in legal action. She sent it via certified mail and email to ensure they could not claim they never received it. 3 days later, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Crawford, this is Douglas Winters. I'm the attorney representing the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. "Good morning," I said, putting the phone on speaker so I could take notes. "I'll get right to the point. My clients are prepared to compromise. If you agree to reduce the height of your flagpole to 15 feet, they will waive all fines and approve the modified structure." "No," I said simply. There was a pause. "Mr. Crawford, I think you are being unreasonable. My clients are offering a very fair compromise. Your clients are violating federal law. There is nothing to compromise about. The flagpole stays exactly as it is and all fines are rescinded. Those are my terms. We will see you in court then." He hung up without another word. I called Jennifer immediately and relayed the conversation. She sighed but did not sound surprised. "Some people need to learn the hard way. I'll start preparing the complaint. This should be relatively straightforward." Over the next week, the harassment escalated. I received daily violation notices. each one adding another $100 to my supposed debt. My mailbox was stuffed with HOA propaganda about the importance of community standards and maintaining property values. Patricia left a voicemail informing me that I was creating a hostile environment for my neighbors and that several residents had complained about the eyesore in my yard. I started documenting everything. I set up a camera to monitor my flagpole, just in case anyone tried to sabotage it. I saved every email, every letter, every voicemail. If this was going to court, I wanted an ironclad record. Then things got personal. I came home from grocery shopping one Saturday afternoon to find a notice taped to my front door. The HOA was scheduling a special meeting to discuss my pattern of violations and disregard for community welfare. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday evening at the community clubhouse, and my attendance was mandatory. I showed the notice to Jennifer. She raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, they want to put on a show. Fine. Let them. I'll be there with you." Tuesday evening arrived with dark clouds rolling in from the west. I drove to the clubhouse with Jennifer in her car, reviewing our strategy. She advised me to stay calm no matter what they said, to let her do most of the talking, and to remember that everything said in the meeting could potentially be used in court. The clubhouse was packed. Apparently, Patricia had drummed up quite an audience for this spectacle. I recognized some of my neighbors, though I had not really gotten to know many of them yet. They watched me enter with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Patricia sat at a long table at the front of the room with her board members arrayed on either side like a jury. She banged a gavel to call the meeting to order, and the room fell silent. "We are here tonight to address the ongoing violations committed by resident Lucas Crawford," she began, her voice carrying across the room. Despite repeated warnings and accumulating fines, Mr. Crawford has refused to comply with our community standards. This kind of behavior undermines everything we have worked to build here at Meadowbrook Estates. A few people in the audience murmured agreement. I kept my face neutral. Patricia continued, "The board has prepared a presentation outlining Mr. Crawford's violations and the steps we have taken to resolve this matter amicably." She nodded to one of her board members who dimmed the lights and fired up a projector. What followed was a 15-minute slideshow that would have been laughable if it were not so insulting. They had photos of my flagpole from various angles, with dramatic captions like "unauthorized structure" and "aesthetic disruption." They had charts showing the alleged negative impact on property values, though I noticed they provided no actual data to support these claims. They even had testimonials from anonymous neighbors complaining about the flagpole. When the lights came back on, Patricia fixed me with a stern look. "Mr. Crawford, you now have an opportunity to explain yourself to the community you have disrespected." Jennifer stood before I could say anything. "Good evening. I'm Jennifer Morrison, Mr. Crawford's attorney. I appreciate the effort that went into that presentation, but I'm afraid it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of both your own HOA documents and federal law." Patricia's face hardened. "This is a community meeting, not a legal proceeding. I'm not sure your presence is appropriate." "Oh, I think it's very appropriate," Jennifer replied smoothly. "Because what you are doing here is not only wrong, it's illegal. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 specifically prohibits HOAs from restricting homeowners from displaying the American flag. Mr. Crawford's flagpole is a reasonable method of display, and your attempts to force its removal violate federal law. We have reasonable restrictions," Patricia shot back. Section 12 clearly states, Section 12 has an exemption clause for flagpoles displaying the American flag, Jennifer interrupted. Mr. Crawford submitted proper paperwork months ago. You either lost it or ignored it, but either way, he followed your procedures. And even if he had not, the federal law would still protect his right to fly that flag. A man in the audience stood up. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with a military bearing that I recognized immediately. I'm Robert Chen, and I live 3 houses down from Mr. Crawford. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I want to say that I'm appalled by this witch hunt. That man has every right to fly our flag, and frankly, we should all be grateful he wants to. A woman near the back stood next. I'm Ellen Kowalski, and my husband is currently deployed overseas. Seeing Mr. Crawford's flag every morning reminds me why my husband is over there. This HOA should be ashamed. Patricia banged her gavel. Order! This meeting is to address violations, not to debate policy. Then let me make this very clear, Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the noise. Mr. Crawford will not be removing his flagpole. He will not be paying any fines. And if this HOA continues its harassment, we will file suit in federal court for violations of the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act, as well as potential claims for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Is that clear enough? The room erupted in chaos. Some people were shouting support for Patricia. Others were defending me. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. I sat quietly through it all, watching the whole thing fall apart. Finally, Douglas Winters stood up from where he had been sitting in the corner. I need to confer with my clients, he announced. This meeting is adjourned. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but Winters gave her a sharp look. She reluctantly banged the gavel one final time and declared the meeting over. People filed out slowly, many stopping to speak with me. Robert Chen shook my hand and thanked me for serving. Ellen Kowalski introduced herself properly and asked if I would mind if she took a photo of my flagpole to send to her husband. Several others expressed support, while a few shot me dirty looks on their way out. Jennifer and I waited until most people had left, then walked to her car. Well, that was something, she said. I think we rattled them. Winters knows they are on shaky ground. So what happens now? I asked. We wait. The ball is in their court. They either back down or we file suit. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo. The daily violation notices stopped coming, which I took as a positive sign. But I heard nothing official from the HOA or their attorney. Then, exactly 1 week after the disastrous meeting, I received a phone call from Douglas Winters. Mr. Crawford, I've had extensive discussions with my clients. They are willing to settle this matter. They will rescind all fines and officially approve your flagpole. In exchange, they ask that you sign a non-disparagement agreement preventing you from discussing this matter publicly or posting about it on social media. I almost laughed. No deal. They rescind the fines and approve the flagpole because that's what the law requires. I'm not signing away my right to talk about how I was treated. Mr. Crawford, I'm a United States Marine veteran, I said, my voice hardening. I spent 8 years defending the Constitution, including the First Amendment. I'm not giving up my free speech rights to make your clients feel better about their illegal actions. Winters was quiet for a moment. Let me get back to you. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was brief and to the point. The board had reviewed my application for a flagpole and had determined that it met all requirements. The flagpole was officially approved. All fines were rescinded. The letter was signed by Patricia Hutchinson, though I imagined she had been forced to sign it by Winters. I called Jennifer with the good news. She congratulated me but added, "Keep that letter in a safe place, and keep your camera running for a while just in case." Her caution proved wise. Over the next month, I noticed increased scrutiny of my property. Patricia or her minions would drive by slowly, clearly looking for any other violations they could cite. I received notices about my grass being a quarter-inch too tall, about my garbage cans being visible from the street 15 minutes before the designated time, about a small oil stain on my driveway. I documented everything and responded to each notice with polite but firm emails pointing out their pettiness. Jennifer sent another letter warning them that continued harassment could result in legal action. The harassment finally stopped when something unexpected happened. I was outside one morning in early August doing some gardening when Ellen Kowalski walked up my driveway. She was carrying a petition clipboard. "Lucas, do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course. Is everything okay? Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the HOA. A bunch of us have been talking, and we're tired of Patricia's nonsense. We want to recall the board and elect new leadership. We need signatures from 20% of homeowners to trigger a special election." I looked at the clipboard. She already had about 30 signatures. "How many do you need?" 75. "There are 375 homes in Meadowbrook Estates." "Put me down," I said, taking the pen and signing my name. Over the next 3 weeks, Ellen and her group collected signatures. I helped by going door to door in my section of the neighborhood. Most people were receptive. Even those who had not cared about the flagpole issue had their own grievances against Patricia's authoritarian leadership style. We submitted the petition with 89 signatures, well over the required threshold. The HOA bylaws required a special election to be held within 60 days. Patricia fought back hard. She sent out mass emails warning that the recall effort was being led by malcontents who wanted to destroy property values. She held information sessions at the clubhouse, where she presented cherry-picked data about her accomplishments. She even hired a management company to send out glossy mailers supporting her slate of candidates. But the tide had turned. People were tired of the petty enforcement, the constant threats, the culture of fear Patricia had created. The recall campaign focused on returning the HOA to its proper role, maintaining common areas and handling real issues, not policing every minor deviation from arbitrary rules. The election was held on a Saturday in early October. I voted early, then spent the day helping Ellen coordinate rides for elderly residents who supported the recall. Turnout was strong, much higher than typical HOA elections. Results were announced that evening at the clubhouse. The recall succeeded by a margin of nearly 2-1. Patricia Hutchinson and her entire board were removed from office. A new slate of candidates, including Robert Chen and Ellen Kowalski, were elected to replace them. Patricia stormed out of the clubhouse without a word, her face red with fury. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The new board held its first meeting a week later. One of their first actions was to review all pending violations and fines. They dismissed dozens of petty citations, including all the ones Patricia had levied against me after the flagpole dispute was resolved. They also revised the HOA enforcement policies, implementing a common-sense approach that focused on genuine concerns rather than militant rule enforcement. The new rules included a requirement that any violation notice be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being sent, preventing any single person from using the HOA as a personal fiefdom. Robert Chen, who had been elected board president, called me a few weeks after taking office. "Lucas, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the HOA for how you were treated. What Patricia did was wrong on every level. We're implementing changes to make sure it never happens again." "I appreciate that, Robert," I said. "I'm just glad it's over." "There's one more thing," he continued. The board voted last night to install a proper flagpole at the community entrance, with lighting so the flag can fly 24/7. We'd be honored if you would join us for the installation ceremony and help raise the flag for the first time. I felt a lump in my throat. I'd be happy to. The ceremony was held on Veterans Day, which felt fitting. The entire community turned out, along with a color guard from the local VFW post. The new flagpole stood 25 feet tall at the entrance to Meadowbrook Estates, with LED spotlights mounted at its base. As I helped the color guard raise the flag for the first time, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The harassment, the legal threats, the community meeting where I had been put on trial for exercising my rights. It had been exhausting and infuriating, but in the end, it had brought about real change. After the ceremony, Ellen approached me with her husband Mark, who had recently returned from deployment. He was a tall guy with a firm handshake and tired eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. "Thank you," he said simply. "Ellen told me everything. It means a lot what you did." "I just wanted to fly my flag," I replied. "Yeah, but you stood your ground. You could have caved, taken the easy way out, but you fought for what was right. That matters." As I drove home that evening, passing under the new flag illuminated against the darkening sky, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not just about the HOA situation, but about my place in this community. I pulled into my driveway and looked up at my own flagpole, the flag still flying in the November wind. Tomorrow morning I would raise a fresh flag, like I did every morning. But tonight, I just stood there for a moment, grateful. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison. "Saw the photos from the ceremony. Congratulations on the win." I texted back, "Thanks for everything." "Anytime. Though I hope there is not a next time." I smiled and went inside. The house was quiet as it always was these days, but it felt less empty somehow. I had come to Cedar Rapids looking for a fresh start after losing Sarah, a place where I could live quietly and heal. Instead, I had found myself in a battle I never asked for, but maybe that battle had been exactly what I needed. It had forced me to engage with my community, to stand up for something, to remember who I was beyond my grief. Sarah would have been proud, I thought. She had always said I had a stubborn streak a mile wide. The following weeks settled into a comfortable routine. The new HOA board proved to be reasonable and responsive. They focused on genuine community improvements like repairing the aging playground equipment and organizing neighborhood events. The atmosphere in Meadowbrook Estates shifted from fearful compliance to actual community spirit. I started attending the monthly HOA meetings, not because I had to, but because I wanted to stay informed and engaged. Robert Chen proved to be an excellent leader, running efficient meetings that dealt with real issues without devolving into power trips. At the December meeting, the board unveiled plans for a Veterans Memorial Garden in the common area behind the clubhouse. It would feature benches, native plantings, and a monument listing the names of all residents who had served in the military. "Lucas," Robert said during the meeting, "we'd like your input on the design. You and I and Ellen's husband Mark should sit down and go through the plans." I agreed, and over the course of several meetings, we refined the design into something meaningful. The memorial would include a curved granite wall with the seals of all 5 military branches, surrounded by a circular path lined with oak trees. At the center would be a flagpole flying the American flag, naturally. The memorial was completed in May, with a dedication ceremony on Memorial Day weekend. The entire community turned out again, and this time we had a significant media presence. The local news ran a story about the transformation of Meadowbrook Estates from an HOA, with a reputation for petty enforcement, to a community that honored its veterans and embraced common-sense governance. During the media coverage, a reporter asked me about my flagpole dispute with the previous board. I chose my words carefully, not out of fear but out of a desire to focus on the positive changes rather than past grievances. It was a difficult situation, I said, but it ultimately brought this community together. The memorial we're dedicating today is a direct result of that controversy. Sometimes conflicts can lead to positive change if people are willing to learn and grow. Patricia Hutchinson never returned to any community events. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was thinking of selling her house and moving. I felt no satisfaction in that news. I had never wanted to drive anyone out. I just wanted to fly my flag. One Saturday afternoon in early June, I was washing my car in the driveway when a vehicle pulled up. A young couple got out, looking at the house next door which had recently gone up for sale. "Excuse me," the woman called over. "Do you live here?" "I do," I replied, turning off the hose. "What's the HOA like?" her partner asked. "We've heard horror stories about some HOAs and we want to make sure we know what we're getting into." I smiled. "Come here, let me show you something." I walked them to the front yard and pointed at my flagpole. "See that?" About a year ago, the old HOA tried to make me take it down. They threatened fines, liens, all sorts of things. It turned into a whole legal situation. The couple exchanged worried glances. But, I continued, the community came together and voted out that board. The new board is fantastic. They're reasonable, responsive, and they focus on actual community needs. That memorial you can see at the entrance, that was one of their first projects. I'd highly recommend this neighborhood now. The woman visibly relaxed. "That's really good to know. We're both teachers, and we're looking for a place where we can just live our lives without drama." "You'll find that here," I assured them. "And welcome to Meadowbrook Estates. I'm Lucas, by the way." "I'm Tom, and this is my wife Jennifer," he said, shaking my hand. After they left, I returned to washing my car with a sense of satisfaction. The neighborhood really had transformed. Property values had not plummeted as Patricia had warned. In fact, they had increased slightly, likely because people actually wanted to live in a community with sensible governance. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sun set behind the houses across the street. My flag hung limp in the still air, the colors muted in the fading light. Tomorrow morning I would raise it fresh and watch it catch the wind. Robert Chen walked by with his dog and stopped to chat. "You know, Lucas, I've been thinking about writing up a case study about what happened here. The transformation from authoritarian HOA to community-oriented governance. I think other neighborhoods could learn from it." "That's a good idea," I said. "Maybe it could help other people dealing with similar situations. Would you be willing to be interviewed for it? Your flagpole dispute was really the catalyst for everything that followed." I considered it. Part of me wanted to just move on and forget the whole mess. But another part recognized that my experience could help others who were facing similar battles with their HOAs. "Yeah, I'll do it," I said. "If it helps even one person stand up for their rights, it's worth it." Robert smiled and continued his walk. I sat there a while longer, reflecting on the journey from that first confrontation with Patricia to where we were now. It had been stressful and frustrating, but it had also been worthwhile. My phone rang. It was my sister calling from Portland. "Hey, big brother, how's Iowa treating you?" "Pretty good, actually," I said, and I meant it. "The house is great, the neighbors are friendly, and I'm settling in." "That's wonderful. I was worried about you moving out there all alone after Sarah." Her voice was gentle, careful. "My family always walked on eggshells when talking about Sarah. I know. But it was the right move. Fresh start, new community. It's been good for me." We talked for a while longer about family news and holiday plans. After hanging up, I realized something. I had stopped thinking of Cedar Rapids as temporary, as just a place I landed after everything fell apart. This was home now. The next morning, Sunday, I raised my flag as the sun broke over the horizon. The nylon snapped in the breeze, the colors brilliant against the pale dawn sky. I stood at attention for a moment, old habits from the Marines taking over, then headed inside to make coffee. Around 10, Ellen knocked on my door. "Hey, Lucas. A few of us are organizing a neighborhood barbecue for the 4th of July. We're hoping you'll help coordinate." "Absolutely," I said. "What do you need?" We spent an hour planning the event, which would be held in the common area near the Veterans Memorial. It would be the first major community event under the new board, and we wanted it to be special. The 4th of July arrived hot and humid, typical for Iowa in summer. I spent the morning setting up tables and grills while other volunteers hung decorations, and set up a small stage for live music. By early afternoon, hundreds of residents had gathered, filling the common area with noise and activity. Robert gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming and celebrating how far the community had come. Then he called me up to the stage. "I want to recognize someone who played a crucial role in transforming Meadowbrook Estates," he said. Lucas Crawford stood up for his rights when it would have been easier to back down. His courage inspired this community to demand better leadership. "Lucas, on behalf of everyone here, thank you." The crowd applauded, and I felt my face flush. I had never been comfortable with public recognition. I stepped to the microphone and kept it brief. "I appreciate that, but I was just doing what anyone should do. Standing up for what's right isn't heroism, it's basic citizenship. The real heroes are the people who collected petition signatures, who voted for change, who serve on the board now." This community transformed itself. I just happened to be the flashpoint. More applause, and then the band started playing and the party resumed. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and chatting with neighbors I had gotten to know over the past year. As the sun set and fireworks began over the Cedar Rapids skyline in the distance, I stood near the flagpole at the memorial. Ellen joined me, her kids running around with sparklers. "This is pretty perfect," she said. "Yeah," I agreed. "Yeah, it really is." The fireworks painted the sky in brilliant colors while the flag waved above us. I thought about all the Independence Days I had spent overseas, watching fireworks in war zones and wishing I was home. I thought about Sarah and how much she would have loved this. I thought about the fight over a flagpole that had somehow brought a whole community together. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes. The months that followed were peaceful. The new HOA board continued to make sensible improvements while staying out of people's way. The neighborhood barbecue became a quarterly tradition. The Veterans Memorial Garden became a popular spot for quiet reflection. Patricia Hutchinson did eventually sell her house and move away. I saw her one final time at the grocery store. She looked at me across the produce section, and for a moment I thought she might come over. But she just turned and walked away. I felt no animosity toward her, only sadness that she had let her need for control poison her experience in what could have been a great community. In November, on Veterans Day, we held another ceremony at the memorial. More names had been added to the wall as more residents came forward to have their service recognized. The ceremony had grown too, with local veterans organizations participating and area schools bringing students to learn about service and sacrifice. After the ceremony, a young man in army dress blues approached me. He looked to be in his early 20s, probably just finished with his first enlistment. "Sir, I wanted to thank you," he said. "I read about what happened here, about you standing up to the HOA. I'm about to start terminal leave and my wife and I are house hunting. We were worried about buying in an HOA because of stories we'd heard. But what you did, how this community responded, it gives me hope that there are still good people out there. I shook his hand. Thank you for your service, and don't give up on communities like this. Most people are good and reasonable. Sometimes they just need someone to remind them of that. He smiled and rejoined his wife, and I watched them walk toward the memorial, reading the names on the wall. Robert found me a few minutes later. Hey, I finished that case study I mentioned. Want to read it before I submit it for publication? Sure, send it over. That evening, I read through Robert's paper. It was thorough and insightful, tracing the arc from Patricia's authoritarian leadership through the Flagpole controversy to the recall election and beyond. He had interviewed dozens of residents and compiled data showing measurable improvements in community satisfaction and participation. The conclusion focused on lessons learned, emphasizing the importance of citizens staying engaged with their HOAs, the danger of letting small groups accumulate unchecked power, and the value of standing up for principles even when it's difficult. I sent him my feedback, and he incorporated some of my suggestions. The paper was eventually published in a journal focused on community governance and was picked up by several HOA reform organizations as a case study in positive change. Time moved on. Spring came again, and then summer, and then fall. My second year in Cedar Rapids was even better than my first. I had genuine friendships now, not just acquaintances. I volunteered with the local Veterans Center, helping younger vets transition to civilian life. I even started dating again, something I had not thought possible after losing Sarah. Her name was Deanna, and she worked as a nurse at the hospital. We met at a community event and hit it off immediately. She was kind and funny and patient with my occasionally dark moods. We took things slow, both of us carrying our own histories and scars. On a crisp October morning, 2 years after the Flagpole dispute began, I was raising my flag when Diana came out with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one and stood beside me as the flag climbed the pole. I love that you do this every morning, she said. It's one of the things I admire about you, your consistency, your principles. It matters, I said simply. The flag, what it represents, I fought for it. Friends died for it. Raising it every morning is my way of remembering that. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we stood there together watching the flag catch the morning breeze. That afternoon, I got an unexpected call from a reporter at a national news network. Mr. Crawford, I'm doing a story about HOA overreach and the laws protecting homeowners. Your case has come up repeatedly in my research. Would you be willing to do an interview? I hesitated. The dispute was old news now, and I had moved on. But I thought about that young soldier at the Veterans Day ceremony and the countless others who might be facing similar battles with their HOAs. Yeah, I'll do it, I said. The interview was conducted via video call the following week. The reporter asked thoughtful questions about the dispute, the legal issues involved, and the ultimate resolution. I tried to keep my answers focused on the broader principles rather than personal grievances. What would you say to other homeowners facing similar situations? The reporter asked. I thought for a moment before answering. Know your rights. Document everything. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. And remember that HOAs are supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. If your HOA has lost sight of that, work to change it. You have more power than you think. The story aired a few weeks later as part of a larger piece on HOA reform movements across the country. My segment was maybe 3 minutes of a 20-minute story, but it resonated. I received emails and social media messages from people across the country sharing their own HOA horror stories and thanking me for speaking out. Some of those people went on to organize their own recall efforts. Some filed lawsuits against abusive HOAs. Some simply found the courage to say no to unreasonable demands. Each of them reminded me why the fight had been worthwhile. On Memorial Day of my third year in Cedar Rapids, I stood at the Veterans Memorial with Robert and Mark and dozens of other veterans from the community. We had added another section to the memorial, this one honoring Gold Star families who had lost loved ones in service. During the ceremony, Ellen read the names of the fallen, including Sarah's name. I had submitted it a few months earlier, explaining that while she had not worn a uniform, she had been a military spouse who supported my service and sacrificed alongside me. The board had unanimously agreed to include her. Hearing her name spoken aloud in that setting broke something open inside me. Tears came, the first I had shed for her in months. Deanna squeezed my hand and Robert put a hand on my shoulder. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it felt manageable now, integrated into my life rather than dominating it. After the ceremony, a woman I did not recognize approached me. She was middle-aged with red eyes that suggested she had been crying. "I'm Margaret Stevens," she said. "My son Daniel was killed in Afghanistan in 2012. When I heard you had gotten your wife's name added to the memorial, it meant everything to me. She served too, in her own way. Thank you for recognizing that." We talked for a while about loss and memory and the different ways people serve. By the end of the conversation, we were both crying and laughing, sharing that strange mix of grief and gratitude that veterans and their families know so well. The years continued to pass. The neighborhood flourished under sensible leadership. Property values increased steadily. More veterans moved in, attracted by the memorial and the community's reputation for supporting those who served. The annual 4th of July barbecue grew into a major event that drew people from across Cedar Rapids, and every single morning, without fail, I raised my flag. On some mornings, Deanna was there with me. On others, I was alone with my thoughts and memories, but the ritual never changed. Hand over hand, the flag climbed the pole, and I stood watching it catch the wind. 5 years after the original dispute, the Meadowbrook Estates HOA won a national award for community excellence. Robert and Ellen traveled to Washington, D.C. to accept the award at a ceremony attended by representatives from HOAs across the country. When they returned, Robert called a special community meeting to share what they had learned. "We met HOA boards from communities that are struggling with the same issues we faced," he said. "Authoritarian leadership, petty enforcement, residents who feel like prisoners in their own homes." They wanted to know how we turned things around. "What did you tell them?" someone asked. "I told them about Lucas and his flagpole," Robert said with a smile. "How one person standing up for his rights sparked a movement, how a community came together to demand better, and how we rebuilt our HOA into something that actually serves the people who live here." The crowd applauded, and once again I felt that uncomfortable flush of recognition. But I also felt proud, not of myself necessarily, but of what we had all built together. That night, sitting on my porch with Deanna beside me, I reflected on the journey. From that first confrontation with Patricia to this moment, so much had changed. I had changed. The neighborhood had changed, but some things remained constant. The flag still flew above my yard, a symbol of the freedoms I had fought to protect. The community had learned that standing up to bullies, whether foreign or domestic, was worth the effort. And I had learned that home was not just a place, but a collection of people who looked out for each other. "What are you thinking about?" Deanna asked. Just how strange life is, I said. I moved here looking for a quiet place to disappear. Instead, I ended up in the middle of a fight that changed everything. No regrets. I looked up at the flag, barely visible now in the gathering darkness. Not a single one. The next morning, I raised the flag again as the sun broke over Cedar Rapids. The ritual that had started as a personal act of remembrance had become something larger, a symbol for an entire community of what was possible when people stood up for what was right. And that flag would keep flying, every single day for as long as I lived here. Not because some HOA board said I could, but because it was my right as an American citizen and a veteran who had earned that right through service and sacrifice. Patricia Hutchinson had tried to take that away from me. She had failed. And in failing, she had inadvertently created something beautiful, a community that truly understood the meaning of freedom and the responsibility that came with it. I stood at attention for a moment, watching the flag climb toward the brightening sky, and then I went inside to start another day in the place I now called home.